Hello, everybody. Appreciate you joining us for the latest in the For Good Cause webinar series. Appreciate you being here. If you want to say hello in the chat, please feel free to do that. I'm going to get us started. I'm coming in from Kennesaw, Georgia, here at the For Good Cause home base headquarters. Appreciate you joining us. I think we've got an interesting topic today, kind of what to look for in nonprofit payment processing, and we're going to kind of hit 10 questions that you should be asking your fundraising platform or your payment partners. We're going to start with some introductions. And before I do that, I want to say this is going to be recorded. I probably will send this out tomorrow or over the weekend, Monday at the latest. So you have to step away. No worries. If you do have questions, just drop them in the chat as we go along. We'll be glancing over there and be happy to answer those for you. So just to start us out, I'm Ronald Pruitt. I'm the president and founder of For Good Cause. For Good Cause is a fundraising platform. Our specialty really is in helping small to mid-sized nonprofits generate sustaining recurring revenue for their nonprofit through monthly giving. I work with nonprofits all over the U.S., from Maine all the way out to U.S. territory out in Guam. So we cover a lot of bases here. If you are unfamiliar with For Good Cause, I'm going to drop a little link here for you now. That'll take you out to the site. Bookmark that for later. Check us out. We certainly would love for you to do that. I'm not here alone today, which is great. We like bringing on experts in the field, that can complement, what we're doing here at For Good Cause. And today we've got George Crane, really smart payment experts. If I've got a payment question, George is who I'm going to. He's with a company called Swipesum. George, you want to introduce yourself for everybody?
Yeah, I'm George Crane. That was a kind intro. I'm a payments consultant at Swipesum. So we're a fintech company that helps businesses, for-profit, not-for-profit, navigate payment space, make healthy decisions for their businesses. And, I work on enterprise businesses doing, hundreds of millions of dollars, a few $1,000s, and we do a lot of pro bono work for our nonprofit clients as well.
Well, we appreciate you having here. And as we go through this, I'm going to be kind of peppering you with questions, and, we're going to kind of go over a lot of things. So we're going to get your take on everything that we're talking about. I'm kind of coming at it from a platform perspective. You're coming at it from a payments perspective. And I think one of the big things we'll talk about is those two things are married. Yep. And you can't think about one without the other.
Yeah, I agree. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we are going to go over kind of the confluence of platforms and payments and things that you have to think about. We're going to kind of do maybe some basic education on kind of how payments work and then how that interacts with, choosing a fundraising platform. We're going to go over 10 questions that we've identified that you want to put to your platform to make sure that you're getting what you need, what a nonprofit needs to be successful with their payment processing. Near the end, I'm going to hand it over to George and just kind of let him show us kind of how to go find, hidden fees and things that nonprofits, don't always think about. And as I mentioned before, if you have questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat for us. Let's start with platforms and payments. Platforms, like For Good Cause, there's certainly many on the market that are helping nonprofits take payments online. And then behind those platforms, you have to be able to process that card and get that money to the nonprofit. So let's kind of start on that side and kind of get to the most basic thing here, and is how does that money actually get to you from that donation form that platform sets up for you. And there's a lot of steps in here. There's a lot of steps, and I think for most nonprofits don't know all the steps, don't think about all the steps, but there are a lot of steps in here, from the donor putting in their card to a gateway virtually swiping it and passing that across the card network, to check whether that card is good or not. Is that $25 that donor is giving? Should we authorize that? And then it's going to come back and, tell the platform, yeah, go ahead and issue the receipts and such, and then the funds will settle in that merchant account and be on your way to a bank account. So there's lots of moving parts here. George, I assume that each part probably has a cost associated with it, and maybe there are certain parts of this workflow or chain here that a nonprofit should be concerned about, or maybe that what are they really shopping for when they think about payment processing?
Yeah, they're definitely, you know, with each moving part, there's usually costs associated. I think a lot of us overlook this, you know, pipeline of a transaction just because it happens in a few seconds. You know, the funding usually happens in a couple of days, depending on your preferences. But there's a lot happening in a little bit of time, and with each, you know, different step, there's usually costs associated. We can dive in deeper, but there's costs, you know, non-negotiable costs set by the issuing banks and the card brands for accepting that card. And then there's costs from your provider and the gateway that you choose. On top of that, you know, we bundle, when we sum those parts, we talk about a business's effective rate or their discount rate, you know, and each is unique, and you know, it gives reason to shop around and make sure you guys have the best fit for your nonprofit.
Yeah. So if we look at this chart here, it's you mentioned those non-negotiables. That's the card networks. That's that sort of back end, the big companies, the Visa, the MasterCard, Discover. They're setting what they get and that kind of stuff. You normally can't get around that, but it's the payment gateway, you know, that virtual terminal that's processing that card, and then that merchant account, which is settling those funds. Those are the things that a nonprofit could have some control over.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Interchange, no one's going to get away from it. The card brands are going to pay themselves. They're going to pay out their card holders, but you can, you know, look for discounts here and there, ways to, you know, the ways you accept payment, just the nature of your MCC code, your merchant category code, and your nonprofit status often, you know, makes you eligible for discounts from the card brands. So we like to look at all of that and make sure, you know, everyone's taking advantage of everything they can.
Sure. Yeah, let's kind of drill in on those two things, the payment gateway and the merchant account, because that's really what you can control. It's what you can go out and shop for. This is an analogy, George, that I've used for many years, because whenever you're trying to explain e-commerce, you want to kind of put it in terms that people deal with all the time. And I often think about going to the mall and handing over cash, like we used to do back when I was young. So if you thinking about that in online giving, so that store in the mall, that's really that fundraising platform piece. That's your donation form. That's where the donor is putting in their card. That's what's making it easy to give and easy to shop. The cash register, that's the payment gateway. That's that virtual terminal. So that virtual terminal, the payment gateway, is doing the same thing that that swipe card terminal is doing at that physical store. And then, well, the money's got to move from the register to the bank account, and that's the merchant account. And to me, that reminds me of the armored truck that rolls up, takes the money out of the register, and runs it into your bank account for you. And one of the big things that we're going to be talking about throughout this is owning these accounts and the benefits of ownership to a nonprofit when you have these accounts. And when you do own these two pieces, you know, when you own the register, you're in control of that. And if you own the merchant account, well, the truck driver that's moving that money, you're on a first name basis. And that's going to help you in a lot of ways that we're going to talk about. Does this analogy work, George?
No, I like this analogy because considering, you know, all the risk and logistics of armored trucks, I think this actually puts credit card processing in a good light, which
right.
You know, for a lot of people, it's probably been a headache in their past. So I like this analogy, you know, and the costs, associated costs with accepting cash these days. I think it draws a great comparison for a conversation.
Yeah, it's actually, it's more secure to take a credit card than it is to take a physical check or something like that. And certainly it costs you less. So the other part of kind of payments and kind of the experience that you're going to give your donors is what payment methods that you are going to accept on that donation form. So yeah, you're going out shopping for that gateway and that merchant account, and that's going to decide a lot of things. And we'll talk about kind of what that means for you. But for the front end, for the donor, what they're interacting with and how they reach into their wallet matters a lot. So when I think about it from a platform side, we're thinking about obviously all the credit cards. We're thinking about all the various wallets that people are typically using, the Google Pay, the Apple Pay, the PayPal. A big one that nonprofits ought to think about a lot is ACH. Bank accounts don't expire in the same way that credit cards do. So if you want to you can get a lot of recurring gifts on ACH. A bank account typically will be held by an individual for 17 years, versus the credit card's going to expire in 2 or 3. So that's a great payment method to have. Daft Pay is a new one. This is something we've launched on our platform in the last year, where donors are paying from their donor advised fund, which if you're not familiar with that, it's like, hey, I'm going to take all my stocks and assets and put it into a fund, and that fund has to be used for charitable giving. And then Daft Pay allows the donor to easily slide money out of that. So you want to have a wide variety. George, I'm curious, you see payment stuff all the time.
Yep.
I'm curious about the wallets and any, I assume that's getting more popular. Is that something that supplants cards, or kind of what's going on in the space now for payments and what people are using?
Yeah. So they'll never replace cards, but they're becoming more and more popular. So, the best analogy I have is the classic, a rectangle is a square, but a square isn't a rectangle. A digital wallet represents a physical card.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to reach for it, but it won't replace that card. At least that's not where it's gone so far. But it's growing in popularity. Here in the U.S., there's a statistic that says 15 and 20% of consumers, reach for their digital wallet for transactions where they qualify, usually mobile options, depending on the merchant category as well. But definitely growing, and it seems like it's right there in your hand now. So in some cases, it's easier to reach for than even a card.
Yeah, and on the ACH, I know that's normally your nonprofit's going to pay less when they're doing ACH, and that's typically most of the time that's less than 1%. You should be getting less than a 1% cost on that to process an ACH donation. Is that right?
Absolutely, and ACH is an option. I tell people you can never overlook because of the comparison of fees to accepting plastic credit cards. And you want to always meet, your donors, your customers where they're at. And if you can limit your cost to, accept that payment in the meantime, then even better.
Yeah, absolutely. Nonprofits are unique. They're not the typical business that's selling physical products and getting taking cards and then shipping those physical products. Things are different for nonprofits. And I think, George, you'd probably agree that they should probably think a little differently about payment processing because,
Absolutely.
Giving is the model for them, and that's coming at them in lots of different ways from different types of payment methods and different types of places. But it's all, there's an inherent trust that donors would have to hand over their money to a nonprofit.
Absolutely.
And how that payment processing affects that trust, the payment methods that you use and how the donation form interacts with those, the name. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but like things like the name that appears on the donor's credit card statement. There's a lot that a nonprofit needs to think about because the trust needs to be really high. If I just buy a product off Amazon, I know I can return that. Donations are typically non-refundable. I want to make sure that it's going to be used in the right way and that I trust that organization. And there's a lot of things that go into payment processing that we'll talk about that revolve around trust. A lot of nonprofits, if you're doing things right, you're on a subscription model. Recurring giving is the most valuable types of kind of individual donations that you can be accepting. as a nonprofit, we're talking lifetime value of recurring donors over $7,600. They typically give for 8+ years. These are funds that just compound and just give you that sustainability that you want. And payment processing is very important in terms of, can you move if you switch platforms and that kind of, we'll talk about a lot of that. And George, you mentioned before, nonprofits can get discounts on payment processing. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of why that is? What does it mean to be, what does it mean for the big card companies that if you're classified as a nonprofit, what does that mean for how you can save money or find a provider that's kind of specifically for nonprofits?
Yeah, great question. So your 501c status actually, earns you guys a little bit of leverage with card brands. They'll give you a discount on the non-negotiable portion of a transaction's fees. And why not take advantage of that? Where, we see as we review statements with our statement tool or our audit tool, where we see people, they may be receiving those, but they may be on, say, like a flat rate model that kind of cancels out those savings. So one, I would say, make sure your provider that you're courting can talk that talk, interchange discounts for nonprofits, but also make sure you have a pricing structure that reflects those discounts. Because if you are receiving those discounts as a business, but your flat rate model might come in north of that discount, it's going to be canceled out. So we see a lot of kind of sleight of hand tactics in pricing, not only for nonprofits, but for profit businesses as well. Things like highlighting the lowest rate in a tiered model, which is just, maybe 3 or 4 flat rates bundled for the different types of transactions you might accept, whether it be recurring invoicing, taking something through a terminal in person. And, not all those transactions are going to qualify for that best rate that they're advertising, but we see it a lot. And then in some cases that even leaves out the cost of hardware to receive that best rate advertised. So we see it a lot. There's discounts to be had, and those should be passed through as savings or a discount on your overall flat rate if you're a nonprofit.
Sure. And when you say the word interchange, that's the wholesale rate that your payment provider is going to pay back into the card companies and everybody that has to be paid, on a transaction. Those are the non-negotiables that you're talking about. And every card that's processed has its own interchange rate associated with it. And what you're saying is normally you can ask for a nonprofit discount, and that's where that's applied. That's correct?
Correct. Yeah. All the card brands, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, American Express, they work with the issuing cardholders' banks to set these interchange rates for each card type and each type of transaction. And they update it typically twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. So they're constantly fluctuating. So you want to have a provider that kind of, can ride that wave with those updates and make sure that, any discount you're eligible for, you're receiving.
Great. So, I mean, when you're thinking about choosing a fundraising platform, that decision goes hand in hand with choosing a payment processor, because a lot of times nonprofits will say, I'm shopping for a CRM. I'm shopping for certain features inside that CRM. I want a particular type of donation form. I want, some back-end workflow and automation and things that kind of go with that. And then payment processing it's just an add-on, or it gets hooked in, and it's not risen to the level as all the other features. And we certainly think that it should be, because when you buy fundraising software, money's going to flow to you through that. And so you're buying financial infrastructure, and that's important. You're not just buying software. So, this is the 2 things go hand in hand, and we're going to hit some questions here about what to ask your provider. But when you're thinking about how payment processing goes with a platform, most of the time there's kind of 2 ways that you're shopping, or 2 ways that you're buying that. The first way typically is a built-in payment processor. So you go to the platform and they either have only one option or they force you into only one option, or they are the merchant of record for your nonprofit. So that means they're taking the money in their name, and then they are going to divvy out the money to you at some point. They become the payment processor in this. So is that easier? Sure, it might be easier to get going and get set up, but one thing that you've got some trade-offs there. First off, you don't really know what the fees are. They're going to probably have a flat rate for you. You have no idea what they are paying, what kind of margin is in there. You have no clue about that. And then we'll talk a lot about this, is that where's the data ownership in this? Who owns the account? Do they own the account? We'll talk about some things and kind of how certain providers do it. The other way of doing things is that you have a dedicated payment processor. You basically bring your own payment processing to the platform and you connect it. You connect your own Stripe account, your own authorized.net account, whatever it is. You've got a relationship with your local bank. You have a merchant account with them. You connect that to the platform. In that case, you own that account. You own the payment processing relationship. You're free to go shop rates and switch software around. Take that payment processor with you if you ever have to switch. And you have the opportunity to, choose a nonprofit specific processor. If you want to do that. George, any initial thoughts here before we kind of jump into the 10 questions here?
I would just remind people, don't settle for simplicity. These platforms, they wouldn't mandate payment offerings if there wasn't profit to be made from them, typically at your expense, by way of a markup. And don't look at, payment processing as just the cost of doing business. I hear that a lot. And I wish I could, help people kind of reframe their thinking as, this is, albeit maybe a small portion of your revenue, it's still important. And when we start talking about the nonprofit space, it can really make a difference.
Yeah, it is a feature that you should be shopping for and understanding how it works. And as we go through these 10 questions, I hope that we're gonna give nonprofits some ammunition when they're talking to their providers. So hopefully this is loading for me. Okay, yeah. So what are these 10 questions that we're talking about? These are things that when you are interviewing a fundraising platform, maybe a payment processing provider, that you have these questions in mind, and make sure you get the right answers that you're looking for. You still hear me, George? I'm having a little lag here on my screen.
Nope, my side.
Okay. All right. So, and the screen is showing you what?
10 questions to ask your provider.
All right. I'm trying to move forward here. Hold on.
Let me know. I can try to.
Yeah. See if you can advance the slides there. Just mouse over it and you'll hit that. So.
How's that for you?
Perfect. All right. So the first one that you want to hit them with is, who owns the payment processing account? Who owns it? So is that merchant account, that payment gateway that we talked about, and maybe those are bundled in one. There are providers that are kind of doing both of those functions, swiping cards and moving money. It's all in one, of course. Is it in your legal name or is it in the platform's name? Do you have a dashboard that you can go to separate from the platform that lets you see your payments, when they're going out? Do you have control over doing refunds? Like, who is in control of the payment processing of money going in and money going out? One thing that I should mention, most fundraising platforms that are on the market right now, they only take Stripe. They only allow you, as kind of the primary processor, is to connect a Stripe account to that platform. And a lot of them are asking you to get that Stripe account through the platform. So there's a product that Stripe sells called Stripe Connect. And it's a product that they sell for platforms so that platforms can sign people up for Stripe. And there's kind of 3 levels to Stripe Connect. There's a standard level, which means you own the Stripe account. And then there's also Express and Custom. And if you're on Express or Custom, then the platform actually has ownership of that account. And how to kind of tell is if you can go directly to dashboard.stripe.com and log in and do refunds and understand the payment, then you might own it yourself. You might be in a standard account. If you're seeing into the control of your payments is only through the platform, then you're probably on Express and Custom. And the risk factor there is maybe you can't take that account with you. And there are some platforms, and we'll talk about this, that if you're on Express or Custom, you can't take any data out of that as well. And they might be a merchant of record. They might actually be taking the money in their name into their bank account. And we'll talk about some of the dangers, of that. George, this seems to me like something that only happens in the nonprofit world. Are you seeing this in the for-profit world ever? It just doesn't seem like a business is saying, no, you take the money in your name and you cut me a check whenever you want to.
Yeah, we see it in both. And in both cases, we work to dismantle it and make sure people understand the leverage they have by keeping these things within their own ownership. So I do see it in both. It's usually related to, ISVs or what we refer to as integrated software vendors, platforms, which, there's some great ones in the like For a Good Cause in the nonprofit space. There are some on the for-profit space as well, obviously. But kind of the same story, we have the same approach, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit business, you're going to have more leverage long-term over your pricing, over your customers' data. And, we help negotiate ways into these software sometimes so that people can maintain that ownership.
Sure. So what's a good answer? What do you want to hear? You want to hear the account is in your organization's name. You have direct login access. We connect to it. We don't own it. So you want to hear that you have complete ownership. The second question is, can we move our recurring donors if we leave? So if you ever have to switch off your fundraising platform, move to a new CRM or something of that nature, do you have the ability to take your recurring donors with you? So this is all about donor retention. If you want to move, you want to get that new feature, you want to be at that new platform, you want to be able to take those recurring donors with you. You want to retain them. You don't want to have to bother them to have them re-enroll on the new platform. You want to make sure that migration is easy. And it's not always the case. There's a marketing company for nonprofits called Whole Whale. They did a study. They announced this on their podcast last year that 25% of fundraising platforms do not let you take your recurring donors at all. You are not allowed to take that data. That is owned by the platform. 25% is a huge issue there. George, have you come across like a business or something that like maybe was a subscription business and suddenly they found out that they didn't actually own their data there?
We do, and we work on projects where it's happening more often than I'm happy to admit. I could talk about tokens at length, which we can kind of dive into eventually, kind of what a token is. But your customer data, especially on if you're a business relying on recurring revenue, is your livelihood, and you don't want to be told that that can be held hostage from you. So I've seen it happen. We work on projects where we're in the middle of that, working on token transfers. And, it's unfortunate, but, sometimes we've run into cases, within that 25% of companies, maybe, similar to those ones where they're staunch on not giving them up, and legal has to get involved, and it's never a fun conversation. So it would be one, that I would advise everyone avoid from the very beginning. And payments is dynamic; it's changing every year, and you want to be able to own your data, so that you can flex and grow with your customers. We mentioned digital wallets earlier, things like that. You want to have as much control over your transactions, your customers' data, so that you can continue to kind of evolve with the landscape.
Sure. So the answer that you want is from the platform, your recurring gifts keep processing after you leave, because the payment method lives in the payment gateway that you control and not trapped inside the software. Step 3, where are the recurring donation tokens stored? George, you just mentioned tokens. What is a token? What is that, and what does that mean for a nonprofit?
Yeah, a token is just a unique, randomly generated code representing a customer's actual card data, or the PAN data, PAN data, the 16 digits on the back of any card. So, a responsible payments company, to maintain compliance, will encrypt that with a code, and they'll host them for you on their side, so that you guys can maintain PCI compliance and safety data. Yep.
So if a nonprofit does want to leave a platform and go to another platform, you got to make sure that the tokens come with you. You got to make sure that the PAN data, that card data, the schedule to charge the card, the donor's information, all of that comes with you. And then, like you say, 25%, sometimes they'll just say, no, we're not going to work with you. And then the other 75%, it's not like you just download a file, right? No. Like, this is a back end secure, like business to business operation. What does a token migration look like?
Yeah, a responsible payments company will actually send their client, in this case the nonprofit, that file, and it differs, from provider to provider, but most of them have a formal process of sending a secure file to the new payment gateway or the new provider directly, where they will send it with the encryption key. So the new provider will decrypt the previous file and then re-encrypt it with their code, so that everyone's data is safe from one platform to another.
Right. And I've done a few of these. I know you have too. It depends on the provider that you're working with, but it can take a while. There's some providers that are very cooperative, and there's some that are not.
They're not all people.
Right. It can take a while.
Yeah.
And so in the fundraising software space, most of the time, platforms are storing those tokens on the platform side. So if you want to leave, you got to ask that platform, give me my tokens. I'm going over here. So it's definitely something that you want to think about. And the good answer that you're looking for from that platform is, hey, the recurring tokens are stored in the payment gateway. So for example, if your gateway is authorized.net, they'd be stored in they have a recurring billing service called automated recurring billing, or ARB. If your provider is Stripe, they would be recorded in the subscription records in Stripe billing. That they're stored in the gateway. And then if you move on from the platform, that schedule, everything is there, and those will continue to process every single month without the platform. Number 4, whose name appears on the donor's bank account or credit card statement. So this is something called the statement descriptor. This is, the donors made their gift, and at the end of the month, they're looking at their statement and what name appears there. And if you're on a platform that is on one of those, express or custom accounts, or is being the merchant of record, well, maybe the platform name shows up on the donor's credit card statement. Well, that can cause confusion. Obviously, you want your name to appear there. And I assume, George, that the nonprofit wants that to be customized in a certain way or have that ability. And I'm also curious if you've seen, or what can happen if there is confusion. Are we talking about refunds, chargebacks? What can happen there?
Definitely both. A refund would be a request. The chargeback would be the forceful hard way that you want to see. But,
yeah, there's cost for a chargeback too, right? There's a fee for that. There's a fee for that. Yeah.
So make it something familiar. There's a direct correlation, a high correlation between unfamiliar descriptors for nonprofits and for-profit businesses, and on those transactions and chargebacks. We probably all looked through our banking app and had to remind ourselves what a transaction was for. Mm-hmm. And, there's a moment of pause before you decide if you want to fight it or not. So, if you can. And then, there's, it's also worth mentioning, most businesses have a threshold of 1% for chargebacks before there's a manual review for that account to see if they still want to support it. And that can result in funds being held, which can cause a slew of issues, or, worst case scenario, that merchant account could even be shut down. And, you're back to square one and you're kind of, jumping to get set up again.
Right. And it's that donor trust thing we mentioned before, that if a donor doesn't see that name, doesn't know that name, doesn't trust that organization, or that's not who I gave to, then they lose trust in the original nonprofit that sent them into that donation form, into that process there. So the good answer that you want, your organization's name appears on the statement, and yes, it can be customized. That's absolutely what you want to hear. 5, can we choose our own payment processor? So this is when we're talking about kind of those two ways to buy. Are you forced into whatever the platform has for you? Either they only support one provider, they only support you getting it from them, platforms, payments, or whatever you want to call it, whatever the tagline that they have for it. Are you forced with that? Or can you go out and get your own provider? Can you go get your own merchant account, a Stripe account that you own, your own authorized.net account? Authorized.net is a good example because that is the payment gateway piece. So that's that virtual terminal, and you can connect virtually any merchant account across the country from thousands of providers to that authorized.net account. So you get to be with your local bank, your nonprofit provider, somebody you've been with forever, maybe that you've had on the for-profit business side that your board members associated with, and you get to negotiate. You get to go out and shop instead of, accepting that one thing that the platform has for you. George, if a nonprofit has never really gone out and shopped for payment processing before, what's kind of typical rates they should see? Like what's a good deal? What's things they should look for?
Yeah, we in the industry, we kind of benchmark off the shelf standard pricing is 2.9 and 30 cents. You can get this with platforms like Stripe or QuickBooks. And it effectively puts you, you're saying, I'm comfortable accepting transactions for 3 to 4% of my revenue, depending on, your monthly processing volume, your average ticket, and a few other things. But For nonprofits, we mentioned it earlier, since you guys are eligible for discounts with your 501c status, you should, talk to a provider that will consider, chopping that down and passing that on to you as savings. And you shouldn't settle for something, with off the shelf pricing, kind of that standard industry pricing.
Right. So if you can have that conversation and get yourself under that 3%, under that 2.9, you should feel pretty good that you've found a partner that is going to at least pass some of those savings on to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the good answer: bring your own processor, bring your own rates, or use ours. That it's an option. That it's your call. Your call. You're in control of that. Number 6, who controls the payout timing? So this is when money hits your bank account, how often it hits your bank account. Are you in control of those refunds like we talked about? Can you see all the payout details? Do you actually get a statement that says X money paid out to your account on X date? This is all about, cash flow control. If a platform is being a merchant of record on your behalf, well, that money is sitting in their account maybe for a week or a month. I've heard stories that, I'm not getting paid for 2 months. They cut me a check in lump sum. For a while. It does happen. And they're sitting on that money, and you don't have access to that, and you're not getting to use that right away. So the faster you get your money, the more control, obviously, the better. George, what's a reasonable expected time frame for payouts? And then obviously there are different ways that payouts happen. You've got things like Stripe that take the money out before the deposit. You've got normally a traditional merchant account and gateway combination will deposit 100% and then take the fees out once a month. Seems the latter, most of the time we hear that's better for accounting. Like it's easier on your accounting to understand the money flowing in. But what's your thoughts on payouts and timing and the timing of those?
Yeah, I'd say it's unique. It's customizable for each business. The reasonable default is 2 to 3 day funding for most transactions. Some businesses are considering things like payroll, and they, you'd rather pay a little bit extra to have it next day. So those are different options. And then the daily versus monthly discounting of the fees, when your provider chooses to take those fees out, is also typically up to your discretion, as long as you own that relationship. And then from like you mentioned, Ronald, then it's kind of just preference for the accounting team.
Right. Yeah. So if you own that account, you get part of the say. You've negotiated your say over things like payouts and when they happen and how they happen. So yeah, that's super smart. So the good answer: you can see and influence payout timing, and refunds are straightforward from your own dashboard. That you're in control of money coming in and money going out. Number 7, what happens if a platform goes out of business? So this used to be theoretical, but last year the fundraising platform Flip Cause, they were being a merchant of record. They had either a Stripe Express or a Stripe custom account, set up with Stripe, where Flip Cause owned the account. The money was actually going to them in their bank account. They weren't performing well, so they started using that money.
Oh man!
They went bankrupt and ended up owing nonprofits millions of dollars. So the question that you can ask is, what happens if the platform goes belly up? And the answer that you're looking for is, again, about account ownership. If you own the account and the gateway, then your donations are going to keep flowing to your bank, even if the platform disappears tomorrow. Now, would you have to, go to another platform and reconnect that payment processing? Yeah. And hopefully you'd be able to do that pretty easily. But when you own that, at least the money is going to continue to flow. Those credit cards are going to continue to process. Number 8, can we get support from a real human being? Sometimes if you sign up for a platform, the payments are just there. You don't know on the payment side if you can get support. So can you get a live person on the phone, on email, on chat when you have a payment question? George, what's that worth to a nonprofit? Have you seen issues when they don't have that?
Yeah. I think that's everything. In the age of, all the different choices we can make on the platform, on the provider, once you can control costs, support is probably the next, biggest thing you're making a decision on. And it can be scary for businesses, is to not be able to receive the help when you need it, especially on things like chargebacks, on maybe it's a big donation or big transaction, bank account updates and things like that, where you need, verification that it happened. The things are really important to keep businesses moving. And I wouldn't trust a bot with some of these issues personally. All my clients to either.
Yeah. I don't think you want a bot issuing a refund or helping you with a refund or something like that. Absolutely. So the right answer, here's the direct line and the name of the person who helps you, that you've got a concierge that's helping you on the payment side. Absolutely. 9, can we disconnect the platform ourselves? This is about your ownership and your ability to leave. What's owned by you, what's owned by the platform. Do you have to let the platform know that you're leaving? And then do you have to negotiate that? Certainly there are both platforms and payment providers that have really long-term contracts that you can't get out of. George, I know you've seen this. Like, a nonprofit should want what? No termination fees. I mean, I think that's, if you can negotiate that, you're doing really well, because obviously there's a lot of payment providers that will say, well, you're stuck with us for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Cost, number one, if, based on today's agenda. 2 is support from the last question. And then 3, terms and conditions are huge. Maybe push them even above support, because you're going to live with those terms, after you sign. So we try to negotiate out all early termination fees. There's usually a standard term still associated with it, but there's no monetary penalty. So I would tell everyone, keep an eye on those things. Read it before you sign. If you don't know, find someone who can help, like me. Happy to.
That's right. That's why we have you, George. Yeah. So the good answer, you can disconnect from us from your own account without asking. And finally, are there hidden fees inside the processing? A lot of platforms are adding a whole bunch of stuff on top of what they're telling you their standard processing rate is. There may be platform-based percentage transaction fees that are on top of whatever they want you to pay for their standard Stripe fee or whatever it is. There's also hidden things that your donors are having to pay, like donor tips to the platform that are hidden on a form that donors are having a hard time unchecking and finding even where that is. You'll be making $100 donation, and then at the end it's $115. There'll be some sort of 15 to 20% percentage tip that you didn't see as you go through this. There is a platform. I won't say who. You do kind of spread it on bread, but that's in a class action lawsuit now because of kind of hidden fees. So you can have things hidden inside the quoted processing rate, as we talked about before. Like, they're going to tell you it's 2.9, but really they're going to pay 1.9 or something. And then they're going to add on a lot of percentage-based things that either you have to deal with or your donors. They're monetizing your donors' generosity, which is certainly something that you want to avoid. The right answer that they say, yeah, here's how it breaks down. Here's how it's itemized. This is us. This is the processor. This is how it all shakes out. So, we talked a lot about ownership and all kind of stuff. I do want to speak to just briefly how we handle things at For Good Cause, is we want to be doing things the right way. You can bring your own processor, authorized.net or Stripe. We do have a branded For Good Cause payment, which is an authorized.net based product. But you can bring your own. And your tokens are stored in the payment gateway. So you can leave and disconnect us at any time if you need to, and can still continue to process. No per transaction platform fees and donor tips are going to go to the nonprofit, not to us. So it's about data ownership and fair pricing. So I just want to note that that's what we do, and we think all platforms in this space should do that. On the right, I've got a little handout. I'm going to let you download these questions, so you can take them. You can take them with you. So you can download this on the right. For people that are watching later, we'll have this linked when we post this online. And then, before we get out of here, George, I want to kind of pivot back to pricing.
Yeah.
Because you guys do audits all the time. And you mentioned before that you do these for nonprofits, pro bono.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to give people a sense of what that means and what that looks like, because your Swipesum is not just, you're not a payment provider per se. You are consultants that help businesses and nonprofits find the best solutions for themselves. So a lot of times what you're doing is looking at what they currently have and figuring out that, oh my God, you've got all these hidden fees, or you're overpaying or stuff like that. Would you be able to share your screen and kind of show the results of what you guys typically do?
Yes. One moment. So yeah, we actually built a tool for this. We do enough of them that
share your screen there, George. I'm not seeing it. There it goes.
Good
there
deal.
It goes. Yeah.
So this is an example. If I could wave a magic wand, I would, do one of these for every nonprofit in North America. And because, it's a complimentary service, it's pro bono for us. We love helping nonprofits. This is a redacted one, not necessarily a nonprofit, but it kind of gives the same, breakdown. This client, gave us 12 months of statements, which you can see tabbed here across the top. So they want to look at a full year. And in doing that, we break down a few key indicators, kind of a quick snapshot, health check, if you will, on how they're processing now. So anything in gray is going to be what they're currently paying. Anything in blue is going to be pricing that we can help them opt into. And then anything green all the way down is going to be the difference between the two, or savings in their pocket, going back to their business. So we break it down even further if, someone cares. I tell people, we're a payments agency. We look, feel, and act like a provider in some cases. But more often than not, what originated as a cost conversation, once we get to this step and we're sharing a side-by-side statement comparison, it usually turns into more of payments literacy and everything we talked about today. So we'll break it down, the processor fees, the additional fees, which represent, your negotiables. And then we'll verify, check for accuracy on the assessments, non-negotiables, and interchange that we talked about from the card brands and issuing banks. And we'll see and make sure that you're not overpaying anywhere. And then we'll show you, here's where you can make a difference for your business. So, this client of ours was paying just over 0.5% on top of all the non-negotiables. And we had a partner who was willing to give it to them at a third of that cost for their volume that month. In the month of January, that equated to, almost $750 back in their pocket. And then you look at that over a year, And that can really make a difference. So we take a lot of pride in these conversations and giving these analyses. We share them with our clients. And more often than not, we can be the person to introduce you to a partner that can help you implement these savings.
Yeah. And if you've done this for some of our clients before, and it's been fantastic. And, we also can look at it from a platform side and identify, look at that hidden fee, that's that platform fee, percentage fee, or, oh my goodness, they're asking donors to tip, 20% all the time here. There's between the two of us, we can identify a lot of different things. So I certainly would invite anybody watching that is curious about what they're paying, to want to have George and I take a look. We're certainly happy to do that, and it's fully complimentary and won't cost you anything. Absolutely. So you guys have done amazing work with that product. I know it just works. You roll the statements in and AI reads it, and then you guys get to interpret it and find those savings. So it's fantastic. I appreciate that. If there's any questions, certainly throw them in the chat. Happy to answer those. If anybody has questions that's watching at home, you certainly can reach out to us. And we're happy to answer that. George, anything else from your side? Anything else that you want to mention, or any kind of takeaway for a nonprofit that kind of sums up what we talked about today?
I think we covered it all. I would just say, don't be a stranger, reach out, and let's find something we can make a difference for you on.
Absolutely. We got a lot of resources on our blog. Just this week, we posted half a dozen articles that go really deep on all the topics that we talked about, comparisons between different providers, looking at pricing, looking at data ownership, all the things that should matter to a nonprofit. We think there's a right way to do payment processing. There's a right way for platforms to act on behalf of the nonprofit community, and we certainly want to advocate for that. George, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate your partnership and what you've been doing for the nonprofit community, for our clients. Thanks to everybody for taking time to be here with us today. Reach out if you have any questions, and stay tuned to our newsletter. We'll have some more events next month. So appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.